Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome once again to another session with Fath al-Rahmani fi Tafsir al-Quran by the great scholar Mujiruddin al-Ulaymi al-Maqdisi al-Hanbali rahimahullah ta'ala. And in this session we're going to be looking at a series of verses in Surah Al-Hadid. It's chapter number 57. Al-Hadid 57. The series of verses is 18 through 21. So, as usual, if you have a mushaf handy, go ahead, pick that up, get it ready to go, open it up. Maybe you have a pen or a pencil, you can jot some notes down in the margins. That way you'll have something to look back on and remember. Maybe remember some of the benefits that the great Imam is mentioning for us here in his tafsir. So, let's jump right into it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إن المصدقين والمصدقات وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا يضاعف لهم ولهم أجر كريم. إن المصدقين والمصدقات. Here it says, indeed the men who practice charity, they give sadaqah, and the women likewise who practice charity, they're giving sadaqah. And the basis of this al-musaddiqina wal-musaddiqat, note, there is a shadda on top of the sad. The basis of this is al-mutasaddiqina wal-mutasaddiqat, from tasaddaqa, okay? Which means those who give charity. And the ta here in mutasaddiq, right? Mutasaddiqina wal-mutasaddiqat, the ta, it's missing in the ayah because it has been absorbed by the sad. And this, by the way, is the recitation of the majority. This one here, innal musaddiqina wal musaddiqat, with the shadda on the sad. The alternate recitation is innal musaddiqina wal musaddiqat, without a shadda. Innal musaddiqina, as opposed to innal musaddiqina. Innal musaddiqina wal musaddiqat. This is without the dhamma. The shadda on top of the sad. And of course, this recitation changes the meaning quite drastically. The first meaning is those who give charity, men and women. The second one is innal musaddiqina wal musaddiqat, the believing men and the believing women. Basically, those who believe in Islam. So the root of the first is tasaddaqa, and the root of the second one is saddaqa. So you can hear the difference. Tasaddaqa and saddaqa, they do come from really the original same root word, sad, dal, and qaf. It's a derivative thereof. So there is some connection between the two, which we will discuss later on, bi'idnihi ta'ala. So after that, indeed the men who practice charity and the women who practice charity and have loaned Allah a goodly loan. وَأَقَرُضُوا اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. And this means the goodly loan is which is to happily give, meaning giving Allah a goodly loan is to happily give sadaqah or charity to those who deserve it with a good intention. Meaning to happily give it, not to feel bad about giving or forced to give or upset about giving, but to happily give with the right intention to those who deserve it. It, i.e. the loan, will be multiplied for them, and they will have a noble reward. He says, وَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ كَرِيمٌ. And here, a reward, what is meant here by noble reward, is a reward which will be met with satisfaction and acceptance. That's verse number 18. Verse number 19, it reads, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصِّدِّيقِينَ. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصِّدِّيقِينَ. And those who believe in Allah and His Messenger, those are the profound believers. Their faith is profound. There is a lot of it that's very strong. And there are 8 of them, by the way, in this ummah. A group of this nation who were the first on earth during their time to embrace Islam. That's what this verse is referring to. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ, meaning the first of them, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصِّدِّقِينَ. They were Abu Bakr, Ali, Zayd, Uthman, Talha, Az-Zubair, Sa'd, and Hamza. And the ninth is Umar ibn al-Khattab. Many of you know that he was not of the first to embrace Islam. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala added him to that group based on his honest intention. Now, this part of the verse here, verse number 19, the meaning stops. And then it picks up another meaning within the same verse. He says, وَالشُّهَدَاءُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ لَهُمْ أَجْرُهُم وَنُورُهُم وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. He says, وَالشُّهَدَاءُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ, and the martyrs are with their Lord. لَهُمْ أَجْرُهُم, for them is their reward. Here it means the reward of what they did from righteous deeds. وَنُورُهُم, and their light. Their light here is talking about their light on the Sirat. We'll talk about that shortly. The Sirat, their light on the Sirat is the prophets, which will bear witness for their nations. That's the source of their light. So what is the Sirat here? The Sirat, according to Ibn Balban, that's right, we're turning back to Qala'id al-Iqyan for some reference here of Islamic doctrine. What is a Sirat? He says, we believe that the Sirat is real. It is a bridge which extends over hell and is slippery and unstable. It's sharper than a sword, narrower than a strand of hair, hotter than a coal, and has hooks which grasp at the feet. Traversing it will be in accordance with one's deeds, and so there will be those who will walk, ride, or crawl. Both Muslim and disbeliever will pass over it. The believers will cross it like lightning, wind, the finest horses and riders. The Muslim will be saved, and the abraded and clutched will be in the fire. Okay, so if you're interested to hear more about the Sirat, I will leave a link in the description with a more detailed explanation of Ibn Balban's words here about the Sirat. So their light will be the prophets bearing witness for their nation while they are there on the Sirat. He says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. But those who have disbelieved and denied our signs, denied our ayat, those are the companions of the hellfire. This part of the verse here contains evidence of eternal damnation in hell, that the eternal damnation is eternal. The damnation in hell is eternal. And basically this is specific for those who deny faith. They turn away from God completely. And this can be derived because companionship, note here he says, أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. Ashab are companions. Ashab, like suhba. And suhba indicates inseparability. That's what a sahib is. Someone that is with you, you're inseparable to that sahib, that companion. And so those people will be the companions, literally, the companions of hellfire, meaning they will be inseparable, and that is an indication of its eternal nature. This is verse number 19. After mentioning both conditions, right, the group of those who are rewarded with paradise and those who are punished, those who denied, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala disparages the nature of this life. And he says, اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد. He says, know that the life of this world, meaning life in this world, is but amusement, meaning it's batil, it's falsehood, and it's diversion, it's joy, and adornment, an image basically which is taken as a form of beautification, and boasting to one another. Basically, people use this life of this world and these things to boast to one another, and competition and increase of wealth and children. So essentially refrain from it, because there's nothing to it except that it is, the next part of the verse, كَمَثَلِ غَيْثٍ أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارَ نَبَاتُهُ ثُمَّ يَهِيجُ فَتَرَاهُ مُصْفَرًّا. Like the example, that it is nothing except like the example of a rain whose plant growth pleases the tillers. Right? The tiller, by the way, in this verses, كَمَثَلِ غَيْثٍ أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارِ. Al-Kuffar, the word is the tillers. Those who are, that's like their profession. They're tillers, they're farmers. Basically, what they do is they throw out those seeds and then they cover those seeds. Essentially, they sow them. And this is where you get kafara, means to cover. You put a seed in the ground and then you cover and you conceal it. That's kafara. So when they throw them on the ground, they then cover them and they're amazed by the vegetation produced from the rain. Unfortunately, it then dries and they see it turn yellow after it was once green. ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان. He says, then it becomes debris. It scatters and disappears. It blows away in the wind. And in the hereafter is severe punishment. The punishment here is for the disbelievers. And forgiveness from Allah and Ridwan. Of course, this is for the believers. And depending on the context, by the way, Rida, which is one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rida, of course, is min al-mutashabihat. Depending on the context, it can mean reward or it can mean commendation, praise. He says, وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. And what is the worldly life except the enjoyment of delusion? Okay? Those who depend on it and do not work for the hereafter. That is the delusion that they will be living with. The last verse that we're going to look at here, verse number 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سَابِقُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ أَرْضُهَا كَأَرْضِ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ أُعِدَّتْ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. Race or rush toward forgiveness from your Lord, and a garden whose width is like the width of the heaven, meaning the heavens, the samawat, and the earth, if they were all connected together. And you'll note here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only mentions the width while He doesn't mention the height. Height's not mentioned because width of everything which possesses a width is less than its height, meaning that the height will be much greater than the width. And so it's not necessary to mention it here because it's understood that it will be more than the heavens and the earth. And it's prepared. It's prepared, which is an evidence why when it says here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُعِدَّتْ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ, it's prepared. This is an evidence that it already exists, that it was already created and in existence now because it has been prepared in the past tense for those who believed in Allah and His Messenger. ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ ذُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَظِيمِ. Says that promise is the bounty of Allah, which He gives to whom He wills. And of course, this is done without obligation. When He says, مَنْ يَشَاءُ ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. That is the bounty of Allah, which He gives to whom He wills, without obligation. Now, this is a point here, a doctrinal point Ibn Balban mentions again. He says that He, meaning Allah, is not obliged to do anything for His creation. Neither that which is most practical, nor that which is most beneficial for them. He, the Exalted, has the right to torment and punish creation without previous offense, future reward, or suitable appraisal. He, the Exalted, has the right to do with His creatures as He wills, all of which is fair, and He is not asked about what He does, but they, His creation, is asked. Again, I'll leave another link to that in the description if you are interested in learning more about this particular portion of Qala'id. The end of the verse, he says, and Allah is the possessor of great bounty, Wallahu dhul fadli al-azim. Okay? Which is an indication of the greatness of Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu dhul fadli al-azim. And this is because if the one who possesses great bounty gives something by which He has praised Himself and commended Himself for, then it must be a magnificent award. Okay, so that is an indication that the reward and the award of Jannah is magnificent and great for those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows it upon. So besides the doctrinal points that we've learned here, there's a couple of those that I mentioned, and just the general idea of this world being amusement and joy and a place where we compete. It's an illusion of sorts. There's another point that I want to draw to your attention, and that is the opening words about sadaqah and the variant recitations. Remember, it was either al-musaddiqina or it was al-musaddiqina, those who give charity and those who believe. And the link that we can draw between the two, and that is that when a person gives sadaqah, it's a sign of their sidq. They give charity, they give voluntary charity, they give from their wealth, and it's a sign of their true faith. It's a sign of their true belief that they give from what Allah has bestowed upon them, and it shows their true belief. And that means that while what the verse alludes to regarding the life of this world, about amassing wealth and having children and family and enjoyment, etc., is all a delusion. Typically, when we think of wealth, we think of worldly things. We're buying and we're spending, we're consumers. And what we do with our money is we consume it. But money, wealth, giving it charitably, spending in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taking out some of what you've been given and dedicating it for righteous causes or for those that are in need, can be a profoundly spiritual experience. That's right. A lot of what we do, which is obviously spiritual in nature, like prayer, we fast, we read the Quran, what that requires of us is time and energy. Time and energy. But when we give our wealth, it requires time, right, to have earned that wealth, and the energy that goes into earning it, and then it requires the sacrifice of all of that from the things that we typically love, right? That's a part of the human experience. And for that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran that you will not achieve piety. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will not achieve piety until you spend from that which you love, which is our wealth. So being able to do that can be profoundly spiritual. And so when you find the opportunity to give your wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in good causes, for those that need it the most, or projects that are in need the most, then you have to think of it in such a way, and you have to give it ala tib and nafs, basically, while you're happy and satisfied of doing that with the right intention. And that's when you'll find that spending your wealth for these causes can be profoundly spiritual and extremely beneficial, and certainly something that you will be happy about in perhaps not even this life, but also not only this life, but more importantly in the next. So take a moment to reflect upon that, and this is where I'm going to leave you to your own thoughts. And inshallah, I'll be happy to hear those in the comments. And if you have any questions or additions, I do check the comments, and will do my best to respond as soon as possible. Until the next verse, we will conclude with that. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.